Tonight we will examine concepts that may challenge your perception of the world around you. Strange creatures, chilling tales, and the occasional conspiracy. Here on our show, we will attempt to provide you with paranormal insight. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Paranormal Insight. I'm your host, Tim Sedano, and with me tonight is Zoey Quinn and Noah Van Ecklenberg of Mind Matter Mystery, the podcast. They're going to be all over the place. You're going to hear about them really soon. They're not quite out yet, but very soon. They're going to tell us all about that a little bit later on. But tonight, they're going to answer a few of my questions. We got to talking over Instagram, and I put them to a task. Why do monsters have the diets that they do? Vampires drink blood, werewolves eat hearts. Why? So, to answer that question, and without further ado, Zoey and Noah, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having us. This is really great to be here. So, yeah.
Happy to have
super
you.
exciting.
And this is such an interesting topic too. You know, I was really excited to really dive into this. So yeah, I hope we put on, a good show for everyone. But yeah, we got some stuff. So
excellent. Well, let's start with the biggie. Let's start with probably the one you probably had the most. That's what my assumption, because in my own research, I found that I had the most information on vampires, and I know there's a ton of information on vampires, different kinds of vampires, that type of thing. So what did you find out about vampires? Why do they drink blood?
So what I gathered, which was quite a bit, and I tried to get into a little bit of everything across the board, as well as some like speculation, and as well as from history, and then also from modern culture. So I kind of wrote up everything I've learned about that. So I'll kind of read from that as I kind of also notate it. First, I'll cite quickly some of the websites and YouTube channels, articles, etc. that I used. So time.com, Thought Potato channel on YouTube, D&D Monster Manual, of course, which will come up, historicmysteries.com, wikipedia.com, link.springer.com with an article, Split Brain, What We Know and Why, ancientorigins.net article, .net, the article of the Lamia of ancient Greek mythology, the ancient boogeyman, a YouTube channel called Ancient Greece R with a video on Lamia, another website called thevintagenews.com with an article, The Horrifying Real Origins of Zombies, and history.com, gizmodo.com, and another YouTube called Nightmare Tales. So those are kind of some sightings. If people have questions or want to do their own research, go check them out.
I'll need that list, by the way, so I can put it in the information.
Yeah, we're gonna have a list with everything we sourced for sure.
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of get the sighting out the way, and
it'll all be organized too. So we got you on that.
Much appreciated.
So as I go into this, both of you feel free to just chime in and cut me off, ask questions if you do, and
I will.
If I have anything I can answer, that is from the knowledge I gained, and then otherwise I will tell you if it's just my own opinion or whatever. So, so this question is a lot deeper than one might think.
Oh
So
yeah, it really
men-
is. It really is. When I first heard
I
about
figured
it,
as much. When I asked the question, I knew immediately that there was different types of vampires. That there were, different types of vampires, and different cultures have different reasons
Yes.
for why they
Yeah.
exist.
yeah,
So
Yeah. So
and that's just vampires.
and so kind of with that, that's why I took such a broad sweep across everything, because I wanted to try and get from across different cultures and then also from different kinds of creatures. But obviously I went into vampires a little have a little more heavily at first. So many of these monstrosities, especially including vampires, carry their diet in their legends. So vampires drinking blood, werewolves eating hearts and people, animals, and of course, like the Wendigo eats everything. And zombies eat brains. But it's not often that we actually question why. So again, this is why, like, when you brought it to me, I was like, oh yeah, this will be fun. And then like I started reading and I was like, okay, nobody actually answers this question. Like, it's not obvious. This isn't like a common, everybody can tell you what they eat, but nobody says like, oh, this is why. So you kind of have to like dig into it a little bit.
Yeah.
Needless to say, I was super excited. But so yeah, I didn't really realize the challenge he presented, but here we are. So it seems obvious at first in a way that vampires drink blood. When I began to consider why, though, I did get stuck. Like, okay, they need to drink blood to survive, as we humans need to eat food to live. But it became clear that any representation of a vampire came to me from pop culture and popularized notions of blood-sucking parasites from movies and video games. And even, like I said, Dungeons and Dragons having their own version of vampires.
Yes, D&D. Yeah, I mean, it's important to touch on that, actually. Let me pause you right there. It is important to touch on that there is a lot of stuff that the fantasy world tapped into to tell the tale.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
so
it's really good.
So keep that in mind, ladies and gentlemen, as you watch this episode, that yes, fantasy will actually have tidbits of hopefully truth in these descriptions. Please continue.
Yeah, for sure. No, I mean, that's exactly it. And that's kind of why I do bring them up, because like you said, like they all derive from the origins of these things. So and even within the origins, the more you go back, the more confusing it gets, because you have all these pockets of cultures that had the same thing, but it was slightly different. So needless to say,
definitely.
Yeah, I'll take the step with saying, obviously many of us know the tale of Dracula. And this was actually
Bram Stoker.
I am.
Okay. Bram Stoker. We're starting there.
We're gonna
All right.
I'm doing like a Tarantino where you start in the middle and then jump back and forth.
Yeah,
I can appreciate that. Okay.
So yes, Bram Stoker, an Irishman of the late 19th century. So an interesting part of his tale that Bram had actually released the first version of it in Iceland, and it was actually called Macht Myrkana, which translates to power of darkness. So yeah. So if you ask me, it's honestly like a way cooler title.
Way better. Yeah.
So yeah,
especially
power
now
of darkness.
it's been watered down.
Oh yeah. So that's what gets
has
interesting with this, because this kind of caught me off guard when I read about this. So Dracula is actually a Wallachian word for devil. It's spoken as voivode. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, but hey, whatever. Voivode. So it's a name said to be given to the brave or the mad, i.e., Vlad the Impaler. That's kind of where he picked up the name. It was kind of given to him.
I think the proper pronunciation is Vivad.
Vivad, there you go.
Vivad. Okay.
And obviously, Dracula, meaning like son of the dragon, etc. So again, it gets a little confusing in there. I didn't go and find like actual manuscripts of this shit, so pardon my language.
It's all right.
Yeah, so supposedly Bram's Dracula which was released in London on May 26th, 1897, was actually a cut version. His original that was previously released in Iceland contained the quote unquote truth of the story. So certain facts.
Like what?
Yeah.
What was excluded?
So apparently he had allegedly uncovered what pointed to something all too real for the English public to be exposed to. So he went into he actually took a bunch of research because he wasn't the original progenitor of Dracula. There were some other various ones.
Really?
But they weren't he's kind of what made it famous and made it what it was. So like I said, this basically involves a ship named the Dimitri that sailed from an Eastern European port of Varna to Whitby Harbor. And I didn't quite look into connecting it exactly, but I do believe that this is where that new movie is drawing from, with the whole like the boat and everything, because it's called something different of what the movie is. I forget, but I didn't write that down. But it was originally called the Dimitri.
Okay.
So the London publishers would have him cut the first 100 pages because they didn't want to a panic around the actual vampires existing. So needless to say, Bram took the lore and legend of the ancient creature and brought it to life, releasing it into our reality, capturing our fears and curiosities of us all. So that's really, I think, what made it, what it was. Plus taking it to London made it kind of pop harder, I guess.
Right. So that gave us essentially the Western vampire, the more modern Western world vampire. Okay.
Exactly. And that's kind of why I found it like almost important to start there, because the vampire takes the form we know about from here. But again, like it all draws from, these older accounts or traditions and more.
So you all know I'm switching to gallery mode.
Yeah, you're good. Okay, so Bram had taken his studies from the library in Whitby, England, where he would uncover the location and tales of Dracula from a book called The Accounts of Principalities of Wallachia and Moldavia. Yet, as many of us know, this legend goes even further back to around 1,000 years ago, where the tales of vampire began to take form in the first place.
Right. So it was centered in Moldavia.
Right. And so that's where he took, essentially he went and this book couldn't be like rented or taken from the library. He had to go and like sit down and read it there. And then
nice.
Like he wasn't, because it was like it's the only one. And
the only copy. Oh wow. That's intense.
Man, that better be a good book for that travel.
So
so he talking about it today, so I guess it worked.
It was. Yeah, obviously.
So anybody interested in pursuing that still exists is The Accounts of Principalities of Wallachia and Moldavia. So apparently he went specifically to look for like the path that this took from like Transylvania, or some even speculate Scotland. I don't know how that got mixed in there. Again, there's so much to this that I couldn't
I've never heard Scotland included in that history before.
Which again, I didn't dive enough into that because I just wanted to, like, there was so many other things that constantly get distracted.
No, I understand. The vampire is a huge undertaking.
It's
but go
all
ahead.
a rabbit hole.
So now we're gonna travel back 1,000 years ago. To where like vampire began to actually take form. So it was actually in Bulgaria where the Slavic vampire, which originally translates to ghost monster, made its way to German-speaking Romans who conquered the Slavic people, and then eventually tales would make their way to France and England. So I found this really interesting because that's what their translation for it was. A vampire meant ghost monster.
That's interesting. That's
mhm.
very interesting. Now, does that tie in with the word Strigoi, or is that later on?
So I think that is a little bit after, and then
Okay.
also like the thing is like it's all shifted between like different villages and like so it could all be within the same area, but then that knowledge travels differently throughout.
Gotcha. Ghost monster.
So
Okay.
yeah, ghost monsters. So again, I kind of go into a bit of history because I think it's important to understanding the reasons behind
Sure.
why
Oh, yeah.
we
We
assign
need
these bits of knowledge of why.
Gotcha.
So they were so the ghost monster was actually an incorporeal horror that was feared for spreading disease among the villages of Romania, striking fear into the hearts of the people who took residence and giving a face, so to speak, to what we know today as common viruses and bacteria.
They thought it was all
So
spirits.
it
That's
was a
Yeah.
spirit.
interesting.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
makes sense, right? They don't know about, right? They don't have the technology and the tools we have today. So it's like if something like that is plaguing your village, right, or your city you're living in, it makes sense, especially when a lot of them had wacky beliefs about gods and the afterlife and all of that. So
Mhm.
it really does make a lot of sense.
Yeah. And
Yeah, it does. It does to a degree. I mean, Catholicism was, we're talking about 1,000 years after the Roman Empire. Is that what you said? Is that where we're at now?
yeah, well, we're 1,000 years back from today. So
Oh, okay.
yeah.
Okay. So
Yeah.
okay, gotcha. So it was evil spirits.
Yes.
Gotcha.
So, and that's what's actually interesting is like the vampire isn't as old as we think, which we'll kind of get into after this part once I begin to go into zombies and stuff. And it actually kind of zombies, the vampire comes more from zombies, I think, from what I've uncovered, than the other way around. So, yeah. So as we see, the tale of the vampire was beginning to, take form as the spreader of a disease, which again, to go back to our like modern lore, is like a lot of vampire in like games and movies, they're like immune to disease. So very interesting.
We're just carriers.
Yeah, and carriers.
Yep.
So yeah, so this theme would carry throughout the evolution of this blood-sucking horror, from the bloated bodies of dead loved ones in the Middle Ages, where people would preemptively cover the graves of the dead with everything from heavy stone to a stake in the heart, to the Irish, who would shove large rocks into the mouths of the dead, again, to prevent the bloodsucker from rising to feed on the living.
It's interesting you mentioned that. In the episode before this, I did a short editorial about a 400-year-old vampire girl, was what they called it in the thing. The reality is that the child died bad,
Okay.
disease or something along those lines. So they put a padlock on her feet. This is in Poland, what's now Poland. I guess it was always Poland, but I don't know. But so 400 years ago, they were really afraid of the dead coming back to life.
Wow.
And so they padlocked this child to her coffin. And there was a woman found kind of next door to her in another burial plot, and they were really afraid of her because not only was she padlocked to the coffin, a scythe was placed over her neck.
Oh my God.
If she sat up, gone. So they were really afraid of these things coming back to life.
I wonder what caused that fear. Like
That's the question I asked in my editorial.
Yeah.
That
That
is
is
like, what
fascinating.
happened?
Yeah.
I mean, something had to have happened to cause them to be so afraid, right? To
Well,
like go that far.
there was a time where our ancestors in general, being fearful, not being too knowledgeable about life and death and what
Yeah,
happens
of
to the human
course.
body, they also didn't understand things like epilepsy or things like narcolepsy or
No.
things that make you pass out and go for hours. Like if you have Rip Van Winkle syndrome, I can't talk tonight. If you have Rip Van Winkle syndrome, you're going to sleep forever, and your breathing is super shallow. The doctors didn't have the best tools back then. And it was basically just a little mini trumpet that they put through the ear, put to the chest. It's like, I don't hear a heartbeat. And they'd actually wait on the body for a few days. And if blood started to trickle out, because that's how decomp works, kids, but blood starts to trickle out, they would nail them to the coffin with the stake, like you pointed out. And then they would also yeah, it was pretty gruesome. Now, if they were in waiting and this person was in a Rip Van Winkle state, epilepsy, whatever it was, and they sat up, came to life while they're waiting in that waiting period, they would be killed like that. No excuses. Sorry, you're back from the dead. That's it.
That's a reasonable thing to do. Yeah, given the situation.
Back in the day, I could see
head.
it. Back in the day, no one had any knowledge of any of these weird diseases that's pretty common to humanity, or even uncommon to humanity.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's brutal.
That's brutal. That is cool because as you see, like we kind of have some explanations and more possible reasons for all that as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's crazy. Like the scythe around the neck thing, and I don't know, that's scary. Imagine like you die and then you don't die, you wake up and then they're just like they stab you.
There's a scythe above you, like you're padlocked in.
Oh yeah, you're hosed. If you wake up during that, oh well, sorry.
Just go back to sleep.
Yeah, go back to sleep and go for that eternal sleep type of thing.
Yeah.
Now there was also a period in it wasn't too long, but they actually had a mechanism to where if you were possibly buried alive, they'd have a little string that ran from inside the casket up to the tombstone. There was a little bell there, and if you woke up in your casket, ding-a-ling-a-ling.
And that's where we get the saying. That's where we get the saying, "For whom the bell tolls."
Yep.
Yeah. It's crazy because someone had to have been buried alive for them to put that in. Right?
Yeah. I think if I remember the story of the first instance before they did the bell thing, it was a horribly rainy day that this person was buried alive.
No. It's bad enough to be buried alive.
Never mind, he was buried alive, but he was fortunate in that he was able to break through his coffin, and it was so muddy he was able to get out of the grave, and he stumbles into.
He Uma Thurman'd it.
Yeah,
oh, I see.
For sure.
They got him a bad coffin, so that's
or whatever. I mean, he punched his way out, and he stumbles in. He's covered in mud, and it's like, what's going on? He scares the hell out of everyone.
Oh, I
think a priest stepped in at the last second, kept him from getting killed by the mob. And so, okay, get the doctor over here, because the guy wasn't a threat. He was just super confused.
Yeah, but buried alive.
But that was what sparked the bell in the casket. That
is
crazy.
Good time.
Horrifying. Horrifying.
Thank you
like a
for
worse
ruining
fear.
my night. Gonna have nightmares tonight.
I'm sorry. Please continue with your.
No. That's I'm having fun, so that's why like all this extra information is just like keep us going. But this is where the fun's at for me.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So yeah, like I said, we have all these different forms of kind of how people would handle it, putting heavy stone, rocks in the mouth. And then now we have like these modern iterations, all the way to now where it's like this hyper-sexualized romantic figure with heightened abilities and senses. And of course, the controversial glittery skin. So
I don't know what that author was thinking.
Glittery skin.
I mean,
I just
I gotta
yeah.
hand it to them. They turned it into a movie franchise, and billions of dollars later, they're laughing all the
Yeah.
way to the bank.
Mhm.
But the glittery vampire, yeah, that was fantastic. We shine like diamonds. That's why we have to stay in the dark.
Yeah.
I
So I
don't
actually
want to see
love the
it.
first movie, but
I saw the first
um
one and I was laughing so hard I just couldn't take the rest of it seriously.
yeah. Well, I was like 16 when it came out, so I was
Oh, you were
like
at the
into it.
prime. You're right there,
Yeah,
the
yeah.
demographic. Right
I was the target of that. 16 emo girl. But yeah, so the vampire is of course a creature loved and feared, and but it's one of the various monsters and creatures of old that roam our haunted nights and kind of loom on the edge of our fears of our reality. And I kind of say that because it gets into later my point of like what these monsters represent. But this all brings us back to, again, the challenging question of why. Like, why do vampires drink blood?
That's the question.
And some speculation comes to us from the modern times of its inception, as tales of such a creature took shape and became what it is today. So when a person dies, there are many physiological responses, kind of as we spoke of: the bloating skin, pushing the blood to the extremities, the orifices of the body, twitching from muscle spasms, not muscle spasms.
I knew what you meant.
I know.
Thanks for the correction.
Rigor, yeah.
Save me from putting a little thing. She meant muscle spasms.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Please go ahead.
Rigor mortis, and then of course the other various responses that can be seen. So for many of the, let's say, ignorant dark ages, which of course is the reason for its descriptor, these physical responses to death brought up a question of what is happening to the person that died. And for some reason, someone somewhere began to explain this as the dead are rising once again to kill and drink the blood of the living, only to return to its coffin before daybreak, where it will once again rest. So besides being a captivating explanation to the ignorant, there are, lore enthusiasts, there are some psychological reasons why this would make sense. So the act of drinking blood gave this creature a more corporeal existence, essentially bringing
that
it
actually
into
makes sense from your ghost monster, right? Is that what it was called? Ghost monster? Okay.
Yeah.
So blood for the ghost monster. Gotcha.
And especially because a lot of these blood drinking tales became more popular during like the 1800s, where science really began to take off.
Yeah.
It essentially brings it into our reality, as opposed to being something that's invisible and untouchable. Okay. So like I said, as science began to develop, this gave us a stronger sense of realism with the vampire and a scientific explanation. So in addition to this, is that many cultures, actually for many generations, blood has actually been used for medicinal purposes. Usually to false effect, but nonetheless,
the blood of your grandfather. Trust me, it's
nonetheless, the blood that runs in our veins holds a deep semblance to our lives beyond just keeping us alive. So I'm going to do a little sidestep here, and I'll read through this fairly quickly because it's a big chunk of information.
Okay.
But this is just a more modern take, which I think you'll appreciate, and I just really found it like captivating. So I'm going to go towards the YouTube channel I mentioned, Thought Potato. So they do a more than fantastic job of bringing this this fabled monster
if their title wasn't so comical.
It's funny, but you get into it and it's like you get really into it. Like it's like very like they treat it like
potato. Thought Potato's getting a mention here, I guess.
Yes.
Free shout out.
Yes.
For sure.
And of course, again, this is more of a scientific explanation through biology. of how this could be a real event, even more to the point of why the creature needs to drink the blood of humans to survive in the first place,
Okay.
through a mutagenic virus. So I'm going to briefly quote and paraphrase a small portion of the fictional account that Thought Potato came up with, because I just really liked it.
Okay.
But it does kind of, again, give us some answer in some form, be it true or not. Well, it's not, but you know, you can see how it would be.
It's a potential truth.
Yeah, it's kind of a fun, but it gives
Okay.
some reality to it.
It's more like a theory.
Yes.
But go ahead.
Okay, so again, I do recommend anyone interested in this to go check out their channel. And no, I did not get their permission, so don't hate me. So anyways,
Deal with
Thought
it.
Potato uses the premise of a fictional researcher who has uncovered the truth behind many monsters of legend to put together this beautiful scientific explanation. So a form of mononegavirales, the family's same family as rabies, mumps, and measles, would infect the victim through fluid exchange with the host, biting the neck and drinking their blood. This infects the victim's cells through endocytosis, a process meaning full absorption.
Yeah.
It would be highly effective in infecting every living cell without destroying it, all except for the red blood cells. It would allow the cells to continue their regenerative process while hijacking them to reproduce more infected cells, spreading rapidly throughout the body and transforming the victim. A rapid replication cycle through the thyroid gland would initially increase the speed of metabolic processes throughout the body, and the incubation would be rapid 6 to 12 hours. And those
Wow.
infected will display an array of symptoms similar to the flu, which lasts another 6 to 12 hours. And again, this is part of why I like bring it up, because as we said before, even in like modern lore, it's drawing from like those tales of like you get bit, a day later you're a vampire.
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know.
It's a little more in depth. Yeah.
Yeah, so I just thought it would be fun to just kind of briefly go through this.
Okay.
So after 12 to 24 hours, the appearance of the victim slips into an empiric coma where the final transformation occurs. And importantly, to note, and I find this not only to be creative, but it just makes sense, is that all victims would not all victims would survive this, as it'd be a taxing process. So children, the elderly, so typically the most susceptible would be adults 18 through 35. And the coma would last about a day until universally waking up at night. And of course, while in this state, the flu-like symptoms the victim would experience would lead to, them undergoing the anatomical physiological changes. And so with that, most victims go through the acclimation period with confusion, paranoia, malnutrition, thirst. So that's why you wake up and you're just ready to kill. And so through something called horizontal gene transfer, serotonin.
Interesting. That's very interesting. Go ahead.
Serotonin decreases, making urges more irresistible, while neural pathways associated with dopamine and endorphin release drastically increase, especially in response to feeding, which would make drinking blood extremely pleasurable. And so that's like a brief explanation of if this was some sort of virus.
The genetics on that. That's pretty.
Bravo,
Yeah.
Thought
Potato. All right.
Yeah.
Turned into a scientist. Let's get that cooking.
Yeah, man.
So,
well done.
Yeah, and I'm definitely not a scientist, so I definitely had to kind of take from what they said, because I was like, oh, this is genius. Like,
yeah, it really is such an interesting take, though, the whole idea that it's really some type of virus or bacteria or something like that, just because the nature of how they feed is biting people and things like that. And yeah, but in my mind, like, I always kind of envision them as more of like a demonic force, if that makes sense, right? Not really that they were like, I don't know, like spreading viruses, I guess. I feel like that's, at least for me, initially going into it, I thought of that more of being like zombies, right? That's pretty obvious virus, but like, yeah, there was something more kind of demonic about vampires in general. It wasn't as simple as being a virus, but it does make a lot of sense.
Yeah, in film and TV and all the most other fictions, I've actually touched on that demonic aspect. There was Dracula 2000, I think, really touched on that, really dove into that aspect.
Yeah.
That it was largely a spiritual punishment, that Dracula was in fact Judah from way back when. Yeah. It's like that was his punishment. He gets to live forever as an evil entity sucking on the life of others.
Yeah.
Which is like an interesting kind of comparison, because some people, there are like, you can kind of equate, it being like a dark form of Jesus with the whole like taking of blood and eating of the flesh. So there are some takes that people do like approach.
Yeah, that's a very interesting comparison. I mean, I've always, when I first heard that, it's like, wait, you want to what? You want me to what? Bread and wine equal what? What does that mean? Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
So
okay.
Yeah. Whatever, as long as you get drunk, right?
There wasn't that much wine. I was like, that's it. Anyway, go ahead.
Maybe that's how Jesus turned water into wine. He just dripped his blood into it.
Yeah, fermented his blood.
Trust me, it's wine. Trust me. He's gotten into himself. Oh man, we're going to hell.
Yeah. Well,
no. Let me pause you real briefly.
Yeah.
There was a interesting. I can't remember if it was something like a Sherlock Holmes spin-off kind of a deal or not, but it was set in that era when Bram Stoker was around.
Yeah.
And you know what it was? It was that show that featured Arthur Conan Doyle and Houdini. And they were best friends at one point or another in reality. And whoever wrote this up just built on that. And they solved cases together. And they knew, since Arthur Conan Doyle was an author, he knew other authors, including Bram Stoker. And in that series, Bram Stoker was anemic and had to drink cow's blood to steady himself.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So he'd go to the butcher shop and buy a big old honking thing of cow's blood, and he'd work on, he'd live off of that for like 3 days, and then he'd have to go back again. And
that's crazy.
Yeah.
I've never heard that. That's
so, and apparently that was true. He was in fact anemic. So maybe that's where he kind of dove in. It's like, I wonder hey, you know what? Vampires like that too.
Yeah, so that's interesting, because I mean,
it out. Yeah.
That would create like the human and emotional connection as the writer to seek out more of, how do I fix this and why am I like this? Who knows? Like he might have fantasized himself of being some sort of, vampire.
I know where you're going. The way they portrayed him in the series, he was very much like a vampire. He couldn't be out in the sunlight that much because he was anemic. So he had like 0 D3 in the system. So he's like, oh my God, totally photosensitive. Always had to wear sunglasses. Again, portrayed in this TV series. And had to sickly looking, pale. So I think if he was actually anemic, and I think he was, that was his basis. And he heard the story of the vampire before, and he says, oh my God, so like you said, that gave him all that insight into.
You would connect to that character a lot more if you had that. And then just for fun, let's just say maybe he was a vampire.
Oh, that would be interesting.
Which would explain his deeper knowledge for it. So but yeah, so I think like with this is that, like, to answer why do vampires drink blood, again, it brings it into our reality. It gives it a sense of connection, because medicine, it was used as medicine, so it made sense that something could live off of it. As you just said, like somebody anemic back then might need to drink cow's blood. I don't know if that works, but I would try it if that's all I had.
Apparently it did. Yeah.
You need iron, and
That's
it would be in
wild.
cow's blood.
That's
so
exactly what anemia is. It's a complete lack of iron. So you drink the cow's blood in order to get it.
That's crazy.
And then
Gotta do
otherwise,
what you
like
gotta do.
it would just be, survival purposes. And then beyond that, it just goes down to what I'll kind of get into later, which is like the, natural fears of people. It's not a memorable story if it's not hunting humans. You know what I mean? Like it's not
right.
You
gonna
have to
stick around.
include, there has to be a victim.
Yeah.
If there's a
that's what
monster, there has to be a victim, right?
I was gonna touch on that too. Yeah. 100%.
So it's just a convenient way to make the vampire spooky.
For sure. Now, if I may, a little bit of self-touting, but I'll do it.
Yeah.
Noah touched on the fact that he thought that the vampires leaned a little more demonic with their abilities and stuff. For me, it was a little bit closer to your description that Thought Potato came up with when I was creating T.O.L, which is the Trident of Light, which is a book series I have out. And in that story, it was a little more Star Trekky to a degree. If
That's
Star
cool.
Trekky is a word, I'll use it. Coined by Tim.
Good enough.
But it was a stellar fragment, like a small sliver of a stellar fragment from a supernova gazillion light years away that came to Earth and had a very specific radioactive signature. And it mutated a few people in the Moldavia area. And that's what happened. It just mutated them to a degree to where they became these ghouls, these monsters. So, and it's
cool.
passed on through the bite as more of a snake venom, something akin to a venom. And I think we've even heard that used before in vampire lore, that it's, don't get the venom in you. So that's it.
That's genius. I love that.
Yeah,
I'm gonna have to read that.
Sounds really
I didn't know
good.
you had that.
Yeah.
I love that.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So what was your next step on the vampire train?
So actually, the next step on the vampire train actually requires dipping into zombies. So
let me pause you there then.
Yeah, I was gonna say before we go into that,
zombies,
we might have a little bit more.
We got a lot to talk about.
There is a ton to talk about. We may have to do this in parts.
Yeah, we might. I got some
It's
stuff
already
too.
almost at an hour here.
And
So
it's not about zombies or vampires or nothing. So
I know, it's amazing. So let me dip into Grecian history and myth. You probably touched on this too. In fact,
I did.
Yeah, this is kind of that's a direction I more took on the question. But yeah, go on.
Grecian Lamia was almost exactly the same, except they were almost strictly female. Women were the bad guy. A lot of those scenarios back then.
Yeah.
I mean, wow.
Yeah.
The hell, man.
Yeah.
So I mean, so can you touch on Lamia briefly?
Yeah, we can go into Lamia. Yeah, so I went into the Lamia because it captures my interest. I already knew a little bit about it. I just decided to go into it. But I also chose it because of its versatility and how much its story and eating habits actually align with various other terrors and creatures from different cultures.
That's very true. I know where you're going to go with this, but go ahead.
Yep. The Lamia, often referred to as the original boogeyman or boogie woman. So Lamia was again, it all depends on which version you're reading here. But Lamia was once an extremely beautiful queen of Libya who had an affair with Zeus. And his wife Hera, of course, did not take kindly to this act and turned Lamia into a child-eating demon, essentially.
Yes, she did.
So the various alternate tales of exactly how this all went down depend on when and where you're getting it from. But in short, Hera stole Lamia's children and either hid them away, killed them, or even in some accounts, made Lamia kill them herself.
That's the one I heard.
Yeah.
The last one.
So Hera then cursed Lamia with insomnia. I just realized the connection of those words.
Lamia got insomnia.
Which of course drove her mad, and she began stealing the children of others, just in her mania.
Yeah.
So Zeus actually would go on to try to correct this and give Lamia the ability to remove her eyes and foresee the future. I don't know how that's going to correct it. Zeus is a weird guy.
Zeus is a total horn dog too. I mean, Hera would like just say, you know what, buddy, I'm gone. You're out. Get off of Olympus. Where's the divorce lawyer for the gods? Okay,
got him on speed dial.
It was Hera. Like you said,
that's the thing.
It's more of like a
children that this dude foster.
It seems like a place of dominance for her, because he just kept banging all these women and she just kept turning them into like terrible things,
horrible monsters.
So the horrendous acts of Lamia begin to take a toll on her and turn her into a grotesque monster, just as many of the beautiful women Zeus slept with behind the back of Hera. So, including I'm forgetting the name.
Medusa,
I'll come back to that. Yeah, thank you. Yes, Medusa. That's exactly what I was trying to say.
Medusa,
I don't know. I could not remember that.
Of course.
Except for that tale is a little bit darker, because apparently, spoiler or trauma alert. It's against her will. Let's just say. So
yes, but her sister, I think, if I remember the story correctly, was already. Gosh, what was it? Like,
there's they're all Gargans or whatever.
They're
Gorgons.
all Gorgons, but there are different kinds. Because one sister was the Gorgon of the snake, like Medusa. One was the Gorgon of the spider. So they were holy crap. And the other one was a scorpion, I think, or a snake. I can't remember which. But yipes. I mean, there's some genetic diversity for you right there.
That'd be quite a family party.
I don't know. A pretty woman's a pretty woman, so
until they get turned.
I can ignore the spider leg.
Go ahead.
But turned her into a monster, and again, the tales of Lamia would take form or take from this general outline, often depicting her as you said, as a serpent, half serpent, and the upper half of a woman. And she would become feared by common folk, who then warn their children of this monster of the night, who may come to steal them away in other tales.
Stay inside. Don't go play in the forest. Otherwise, a lion will get you. Right.
Exactly. And there's another one I'll mention at the end too, if we get to it, as well, of Japanese lore.
Let's go there now.
Okay.
I love Japanese lore.
We can always jump back to it. So, this other child eater or child kidnapper of note is the Hachishaku-sama, which is the 8-foot tall woman.
Oh, yes. Yes. Great story. Great story.
So this is actually, I think, taken from and popularized in the Resident Evil series of recent years.
I think so, yeah.
Which I only realized this after you hear the depiction. So she's portrayed as having long black hair, a white dress, and a large white hat that covers most of her face. And of course, she's 8 foot tall.
There's a good one.
Hey, a hot girl is a hot girl. That's all I'm saying.
Get some stilts.
So
there's a way out.
I just gotta.
Sorry, that was
You
very
just gotta.
chauvinistic.
You just gotta stand. You stand up and
Let me
do
get
it,
on this rock over here. Okay, there we are. Go ahead.
So legend has it that only one child was survived, and in some tales it's a boy, some tales it's a girl, whatever. But the story more or less follows the same path. So in Miyazaki, Japan, approximately summer of 1970, this young child went to visit her grandma until
I'm
her
sorry.
parents.
Did you say 1970?
Yeah, so it's pretty recent. It might
She's
date
been
back
around
even
for a
farther,
very long
but
time. Yeah.
yeah, but this is the one apparently where she survived, quote unquote.
Oh, someone
But
survived an encounter?
right, right. So
Okay.
that's where this tale comes from.
Okay, gotcha. Gotcha.
Yeah. And so obviously what I'm assuming is that this is just like the more modernized version of
Okay.
this old tale.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And again, also another culture determined to depict women as monsters.
I don't know.
So well, we're not emotionally not capable.
I mean, okay, go ahead.
um, anyway, so this young girl went to visit her grandma until her parents were to return. So she would play outdoors. She enjoyed, being free and just kind of doing what she wanted. Until one night she saw a looming figure over a tall hedge, and this figure, she basically just saw like the top of like the hat, which was really tall. But the thing that got her was like it was followed by like a chill, so it kind of gave that dreadful feeling.
Yeah.
And then the other crux of the encounter is that it's followed by the sound of po, po, po.
What's that
Po.
word mean?
P-O. I don't know. I didn't look that up. I probably
Okay.
should have. But no, if you want to quickly look that up, you can. But that's the sound. I'm assuming it's just maybe a sound that's maybe we might say something different. But yeah, so the girl rushed home where she cried to her grandma about this encounter. And in some accounts, she also like locked eyes with the woman, and in other stories, she just saw her walking past the hedge. So she rushes home and is crying to her grandma. And at first, her grandma's like, yeah, whatever, until she mentions the sound that it made, and then her grandma just freaked out and fearing for her safety, she locks her away in one of the rooms of the house and then places 4 bowls of salt in each corner of the room. And we all know salt is the salt purpose in paranormal. So the girl was of course confused and scared, and she wasn't supposed to leave until 7 a.m. in the morning. And she during the night would hear the tapping on the window and then the sound po like going on.
To be clear, it's P-O, po.
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
just making sure.
Okay.
I got ho, H-O, which meant walking.
Well, yeah,
that's
what I got. Yeah,
from could not find po, so it's probably a po
it's
or something like
probably
that.
a sound.
Yeah,
po for in Google Translate. I got walking as well.
Okay,
for po for P-O.
Yeah.
Interesting.
All right, ho.
That makes sense.
That does make walking. I'm walking here. She's from Jersey. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So later, either that night or one of the nights while she was still waiting for her parents to return, she hears her grandpa come to the door, and he would tell her, "It's safe. Come on out. You can leave. Like everything's good." And she, goes to the door, goes to grab the handle, and then is stricken by that fear and dread that she felt during the first encounter.
Yeah,
and she would look over to see the piles of salt turning black, and of course would then back away from the door. And then again, in some accounts, she is told to pray to the Buddha statue in the room when she feels this fear.
Okay.
And in the morning, once it was time, she could exit. And of course, she had to return to the room every night until her parents arrived. And once she left, she was told to never return to that area again. And so, because this monster would probably eat you in other ways. And so the overall lore is that if you're a child and you lock eyes with this thing, the next day you will go missing.
Ooh,
Very
interesting. So
Very
Yes.
the ever blackening salt saved her.
sweet.
Yeah.
That's impressive.
And yeah, so and again, that's where we have like this connection with Lamia, and these other kind of creatures or monsters
Yeah.
taking children.
Mhm.
And something to note is that in certain cultures, such as early Soviet Union and China, it is apparently reported that during times of great famine, people would prey on children as a food source.
Oh yeah.
So
Oh,
in
No,
yeah.
that definitely happened.
that's
so
wicked.
there was
Oh.
like
It
basically
was like parents eating their own kids,
well,
Wow.
so in
times must be
Soviet
rough.
yeah, so in Soviet Union there was actually like gangs of people who would go and like hunt children and like sell their meat as like horse meat or whatever. And then
Wow.
in China there was even a tradition of where families would actually swap a child with one another so that they could eat them to stave off hunger and then avoid eating their own family. And however, I didn't look too much farther into any of this for
I
its
wouldn't blame you.
validity.
That's gross.
Yeah.
That's
So
messed up
while
on
it's
levels, upon levels.
yeah, so while it's believable, it's also like convenient propaganda. So nevertheless, the fear of children being eaten is a common trope throughout history and across many cultures.
I
Yeah.
will
So
add. Go ahead.
oh, I was just gonna say real quick on that. I wonder how many of those kind of stories throughout time are literally just from like parents and elders telling stories to scare kids from like going to certain places, right? Or doing certain things, you know? I feel like, especially in like ancient times, it'd be a pretty convenient excuse to like make up a story about like a ghost haunting the river or something like that because you don't want kids swimming in it, late at night or, something like that.
In general, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's done even today. Child,
Mhm.
don't go out in that back forest. The Wooka Booka is going to get you, or
Exactly.
whatever, some
Yeah.
beat up monster.
Yeah.
And there's the other side of that too, with like Santa Claus for little kids. Be
Mhm.
good, or Santa won't bring you presents.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
I was
Yeah.
going to touch on one more creature that I wish I'd had you look into. I did my own research on it for the book. This creature goes by multiple names throughout multiple cultures, primarily
Mhm.
in Southeast Asia. It's called, in Balinese, it's a layak. And basically, it's a creature that looks like, three guesses, a woman. You're correct. Looks like a beautiful woman, but at night, the head detaches from the body,
Oh,
and all of its
jeez.
organs are attached along with the spine and the intestine. And this head and organs goes flying around, and it's
Oh
a
my
super
God.
long tongue. And what it does is it hunts down and feeds upon late term pregnant women and eats the fetus
Mm.
through its long
So
tongue.
I remember you mentioned that to me, and again, like there's so much of these, it's easy to get distracted, but I just and the little bit that I did look into it, I could not find like the stories behind it.
Really? Oh, I
So
found tons of stuff. So
I don't
maybe
know
I
if
took
I
it
just
down.
was spelling it wrong or I just didn't dive hard enough into it. So I definitely want to return to that at some point.
Yeah. The layaks, or again, there's multiple names for this creature from China down to the Philippines.
Wow. Okay.
But
I've never heard of that. It's
it's messed
absolutely
up.
terrifying.
I mean, that's yeah. She's almost waxen looking, like she doesn't quite look real,
Yeah.
and she's always happy, always smiling. Little grin
Oh,
on her
that's
face.
creepy.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
And
We need
you
a
can ride the
movie
bus
on
next
that.
to her, and you're going, something's off about this girl, but she's super pretty, and not really give it a second thought. But then you see her head flying around.
What?
Yeah, her lower intestine touches your
Yeah,
hand.
right. No.
Oh,
And
yeah.
the super long tongue comes out.
Yeah.
That's okay. Yeah.
One thing I will add as far as like speculation with that is like it's interesting, like the fetus was like common with that and like other creatures because like
Mhm.
even today we have like the conspiracy lore of you know, the elites using fetuses for like rejuvenation or of some kind. And
Yeah.
so I just find
like
it interesting
stem
that
cell stuff, or what are you saying?
well, yeah, okay. So like from anything from like people actually like apparently there are celebrities like and I didn't watch this myself, so this is only like third hand like notation that I got this
Okay.
from, so don't quote me on it. But apparently Sandra Bullock uses a product that uses some sort of product from like the placenta of
A lot of cultures use placenta, believe it or
yeah.
not.
So, you know, so my point is with that is that like obviously there's like lots of like nutrients and stuff. So it's just interesting that like these kind of old tales of like monsters taking like the fetus of something or
Yeah,
whatever
young children,
kind of like or as like transformed into like these modern tales of like the elite, quote unquote.
Yeah.
So
I see what you're
it's
saying.
eating
That's
people's babies.
interesting.
yeah, and
Yeah.
I think the reason why it's so common is just because it's a common, or it's kind of a popular archetype, you know, of a story almost, that kind of monster, right, that hunts babies or unborn fetuses or whatever. And it's just because, right, we have, as social humans, we have just such a huge desire to protect, right, those people. So it does make sense, right, that there'd be stories, you know, like
Yeah. No, that makes
stories like
sense.
that
Like,
would come up, like, you know, multiple different times, right, through different cultures and whatever.
well,
So,
and that would be also the like same kind of fear of like telling somebody to be careful the same way you would a child of like don't do this or this will happen. And it also could be like a way of like rationalizing you know, if you have, you know, accidental like
Miscarriages and stuff like
miscarriages and stuff. So
that. That's what
yeah.
my thought was as well, is that it was a way to explain away miscarriages before we knew what they were. And it's like, oh, you know,
Mhm.
the layak came and ate your baby. You know, you're sad about it, and now you have an explanation.
such a
Yeah.
horrifying explanation. Like,
That's
you
a
couldn't
worse
come up with
explanation.
That was
anything better.
calming. I mean, you know.
Couldn't have been like
Oh
a
my
black
God.
swan or something. Like,
Yeah. You ate a bad prune or whatever, you know. I'll take that over a lamia
yeah.
Yeah.
or a
Yeah.
layak any day. Oh
Jeez,
man.
yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes part 1 of the dietary requirements of monsters. Next week we'll have part 2 for you. And be forewarned, we are approaching my season finale for this year. I'll have little specials here and there, but we're almost saying goodbye for the regular season. So this concludes part 1. Next week we'll have part 2, and the conversation is just as lively, just as fun. Lots of good information, and I hope you'll join us. All right, you have a wonderful rest of the week. Bye-bye. Thank you for watching and listening. Please click the subscribe button and activate notifications for future episodes and other content. If you have a paranormal experience that you would like to discuss on the show, please email us at paranormal.insight.podcast@gmail.com. That's paranormal.insight.podcast@gmail.com. Find us on Facebook and Instagram under paranormal.insight.podcast